So Numbers, we're gonna again, the big picture of Numbers is the first 25 chapters is about the first generation, the generation that actually leaves Egypt, and then they die, and the rest of it is about the second generation that eventually will then make it into the promised land. So I'm not going to go into the breakdown. I'll send you these notes and you can study it out for yourself. But I want to talk about numbers in Numbers, which again, what I'm presenting, it's not to be dogmatic, but hopefully gives you a perspective. So one of the, like if you look at Numbers, the numbers that are given in Numbers, in Numbers 1, it gives you these, the tribe of Reuben as 46,500, and if you total it up, it comes to, and these are fighting men, over 20, and it comes to 662,850. That's a lot of people. That's just fighting men. And so if you look at that, then you're looking at about 2 million perhaps, including women and children. And so there's always a question of how many people actually left Egypt, and is it that number? Is it really that many? Because even today's population, if you look at, if you total out the population, I don't know if it comes to 2 million in the Middle East. But you can Google it yourself and research it. But that 2 million is a lot, especially in the ancient world. And where is the evidence of 2 million people wandering the desert for 40 years? And it's hard pressed to find that. And so a perspective thrown out, one of the perspectives, actually quite different answers. One of them actually goes back to what I think Jake, we were chatting earlier, about ancient numbers. The ancient people like to give big numbers because it just made them feel more powerful. Like, how big is your army? I have 3 million people. It's like just. But another perspective is that word Aleph, which is translated as 1,000, but can also be translated as squad or squadron. So if you use this translation, you're looking at 46 squads and not 46,000. And if you total that up, it comes to 598 squads. And if a squad has about 10 people, you're looking at about 6,000 fighting men, just fighting men. And then with women and children, possibly you had 20,000 people, which seems like a much more realistic number of people who may have left Egypt. Especially because you have in Deuteronomy 7 that says, in verse 7, the Lord did not set his affection on you and chose you because you were numerous, for you were the fewest of all people. Now again, there's other passages that, again, famously in Genesis, where God says you're going to have your generations as numerous as the stars. So I get there's an alternate, for this passage, there's that passage. So you have to just weigh it out. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is because when you reach out on campus, let's say you do come into that kind of conversation of, is the Bible real? What's up with these big numbers? You could present a point of view that perhaps this is just about squads of, comes to about 6,000 odd fighting men. So we'll do, God willing, we'll do apologetics, God willing. And then we can look at some of these apologetic type things, which I think is very important on campus especially. So hopefully that helps, the numbers in Numbers. But again, we're back to square one. In Numbers 13, they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. Then they reported to them, and the whole assembly showed them the fruit of the land. So this is they went and they scouted the land, and they came back. After 40 years, Numbers 20, in the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived at the desert of Zin, and they stayed at Kadesh. There, Miriam died and was buried. So 40 years between the exploration and the next generation, and they back to square one. They started in Kadesh and they ended up in Kadesh. And so, as I said, God does not mind us wandering till we learn the lesson we need to learn. Like, that is a fact. So we better learn our lessons quickly, or else we're going to be circling this desert, So the first generation, in Numbers 13 verse 26, they came back to Aaron and the whole Israelite community and reported to them and showed them the fruit of the land. So this is the first generation that went exploring, came back. And then in Numbers 14, because they didn't want to take the land, God says to them, you're not going to see the promised land. You're going to die off in the desert. And then Numbers 20, you have the second generation, the first month, the whole Israelite community that stayed at Kadesh. And then Miriam died. She was the first to die of the previous generation. And so you end up with this really sad and kind of depressing, reading of the people of God leave Egypt. They arrive and they're almost there. I mean, they could literally just go. And yet they didn't. And it took them 40 years. And an entire generation is finished. And then the second generation has to now then go on in. But what I wanted to talk about is the lessons from the first generation, which is really relevant to us because we have an intergenerational faith, which I think is awesome. And pray that it continues till Jesus comes back. The generations of our children's children will stay faithful and serve Lord Jesus. And I hopefully get an amen. Amen. And I'm so excited for you in this class because this is so exciting. We joined the School of Missions thing at Boston. Jacques was there. And it was so exciting to see young people stand up and do things and serve God. And it is a blessing. And it is so vital. And so Numbers in that sense really helps us to learn some valuable lessons. I think the first lesson is that the generation that left Egypt had a very distorted view of the past. So Numbers 11 verse 4, the rabble, the riffraff, as the Holman Christian says, they began to crave other food, and the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. And this is what they say. Check this out, verse 5. Remember, they were slaves in Egypt. They were slaves that were brutally treated to the point where God had to, intervene. But in verse 5, we remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. The cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. They're very selective and very distorted view of the past. I think that is a danger that we can fall trapped to. It's like the old fisherman's tale, right? When you're young, you walk 10 minutes to school. When you get a bit older, that it's become like an hour, and when you get older it's like 3 hours, and then and then it's in the snow or in the sun, or like the stories start to get more and more exaggerated older we get. And I think honestly that can happen even with us, and we have to be careful. When you hear stories from the older generation, God bless their heart, they can tell stories that are perhaps a little bit maybe like a fisherman's tale. Oh, we did this, we did that. And and I'll get to this point. We do have to be kind because we get critiqued. I'll get critiqued. Jacques and I are the same generation. We'll get critiqued by you and by our children for sure. So we better be kind to the generation before us, And you will get critiqued by the generation that's coming after you. I was thinking actually the teens. Anzel is 2 generations removed from you. I'm talking the teens are coming behind you. They're going to critique what you guys are doing, And so it's just the way it is. But it's the distortion of the past is a dangerous. It's dangerous business, and so and this just makes a point of the distortion. I think the second is the distorted view, and here I mentioned selective memory, romanticizing the past, how great things used to be. Oh, back in the day we used to convert 100 people a day, and it's good to ask questions when you do hear that. I live with someone who has done that. Angie and Temba led WITS ministry when they were 100 big, 50 women, 50 men. And so she actually can tell you stories about the stuff they did, and so can Temba, but also can tell you stuff that they shouldn't have done. So there's lessons there. So when we hear the past, there's a good opportunity to ask questions and just maybe go beneath the narrative slightly more. But then there's the distorted view of the future, which is just as dangerous. Numbers 14, verse 6, Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who among those who had explored the land tore their clothes and said to the entire assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they could not see it. So distorted view of the past, distorted view of the future, and failure to see what God is doing. And that can happen. I can speak to personally the distorted view of the future. I have to guard against cynicism and what I believe God can do now and in the future. So my ministry experience is quite different in that I went into ministry as a volunteer in 2010, and for whatever reason God decides my ministry is going to be a rebuilding ministry. So wherever I've been, I've had either one to none campus students, and I've had to start from scratch. And it's been, I don't have great stories of massive growth, and I show up and in a year's time we go from 1 to 50 or 1 to even 10, and it's been difficult, honestly. And in fact, I spoke to someone earlier this year, my mentor in the ministry, and I said to him, I'm giving God till 2022, end of 2022. And if I don't see any numerical growth, that means I would have done a ministry in general for almost 12 years. And so I said, I think then God's maybe saying, this is maybe not for me. And he was helpful to talk to him, and he gave me some good wise counsel and such. But as you can imagine, I can become cynical, like nothing works. I've tried everything. And it's been a great journey of learning and just remembering that my value doesn't come from production, it comes from the Lord. And He asked me to serve. I'm going to serve Him, even if that means cleaning the toilet. Like just finding joy in serving the Lord. And there's a lot of wonderful lessons. And also remembering that I don't give God ultimatums. He gives me, So I don't tell God 2022 whatever. I just serve Him. And so there's been some good fruit. But as you can imagine, I can have a distorted view of the future. And I can see School of Missions with cynical eyes, like, And so again, it's the lessons from the past, is the generation. And I want to be around you. I want to hear your stories of victory, because that helps me. And instead of being cynical, wait till they come to my age, then they're gonna, unfortunately that happens. Wait till they get into and that's a terrible attitude. And I want to be excited. I want to be around you. I want to hear your stories, and celebrate my own role in the ministry. For times such as these, I get to be in places where I have to be part of the rebuilding and be excited. Like, hey, this is a wonderful blessing. For whatever reason, God decided I should have that ministry role, and I pray I can do it faithfully. And so again, it's the distorted view of the future, and awareness of the past can help us repeat the past, which is an important lesson also. And we see this in Numbers 20, verse 2, where there's this is now the second generation. So do not confuse this with the first, because the story sounds very identical to the first. Now there was no water for the community, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses and said, "If only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this wilderness, that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain, figs, grapevines, pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." And I'll stop there because, like I said, don't confuse this or feel like we're reading the same scriptures twice, because this is the same incident that took place twice before. And the second generation is repeating the first generation. And they're doing the exact same thing. If there is no water, we should have just gone to Egypt and died. And well, why did you even bring us out here? So we, to die. So again, being careful that awareness of the past will help us, hopefully. And so as young ministers, pray to grow in awareness. If I remember, Jacques mentioned you guys did something on awareness. It's just very, very important, and it's a blessing. It's a wonderful thing to have. I wish I had it when I was a younger disciple, something on awareness. I had to learn the hard way. And then as young ministers, I have to say, please be aware of not just your history, but all the disciples. I learned this from my mentor in the ministry, Damon Brogue. And one of the things he used to tell me is, don't always just think of yourself as a campus minister. And he learned that from his mentor in the ministry. And back in the day, this is back in late 90s, early 2000, his mentor would make him wear suits to church. Now he was a campus minister, dressing like campus ministers do. But his point was, you're not going to always be a campus minister, and when you go minister to older people, you got to make sure that you dress appropriately, and so come to church in a suit and tie. This is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Okay, so I was amazed, and so my point I'm making is, you will interact with older disciples, not just campus students. The older disciples would have their own history that is very different from yours. Yeah. Very different experiences. And so be aware of it, get to know them, be mindful, resist the urge to critique or judge. If you're anything like me, it's fun to judge. But be aware and just listen and be aware of their history and the times they struck the rock, or the times they complained, the times that they felt wronged, or they felt things weren't right, because they're coming from a point of view. Yeah. I think it'll help as much as you're aware of your history. And then the final point, this I think is so essential. We are all living and leaving a legacy. It's a continuum. I used to think legacy was after you die, something that happens after I die. But I've come to realize, actually, I don't know if that's true as much as, yes, it is in some sense, but we actually are living and leaving a legacy almost every day. I see that with my son. I teach him, I interact with him. The fact that he wants to come see me, it's amazing that he wants. That's a legacy. I think he said voluntarily, I forget a conversation we had, and he's like, he wants to teach the Bible, to people. Yeah, I was surprised to hear that, because wow, but that's legacy that prayerfully we're leaving, in our interactions with people. And that's the hard part for me in ministry. I like to see clear production, because then there's some clear, okay, I put so much work, I get so much out. And it's not like that. It's a different kind of feedback. I had someone send me a message. We're doing this renewing image bearers for young Christians, 0 to 5. And we do in phases. We did phase 1, and we do phase 2. And I record these videos, put them on YouTube. I have more videos than I have subscribers. I think 74 videos. I have 72 subscribers. And so I was like, man, I don't know if I should be doing this. It seems like a waste of time. Who's even watching? Then I go check the views. It's like 5, 2, 3. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm really. But here's my point. I got a message from one of the young Christians saying, hey, these videos are great. It's really helping me grow in my faith. So it's like, all right, Lord, for one person. And that's something I do tell the Lord. I said, Lord, even if it's one person, I'm going to do it. And sure enough, I got a message from one person. Maybe I'm just saying the wrong thing to the Lord. Maybe I should say, Lord, if 100 people, But there's that, but it's genuinely the legacy. That's part of the legacy in 20 years. Some young Christian today in 20 years will say, you know what, that lesson helped me stay faithful. And that's a legacy. And so even now, as a young age, at a young age, you are leaving a legacy,
Yeah.
as much as you're living one. And I think it's important to be mindful of that, of what is it that we are, what is it we're leaving, without getting crazy and paralyzed by analysis. But I think it helps. I think Numbers is a wonderful lesson in legacy, in faith, in mistakes, in repeating the past. But also, as I said, be kind to the first generation. They left Egypt. I think that's a great question. They had some questions as they're wandering. It's like, what are we doing here, Lord? And to have compassion. They try to figure it out. And so that's Numbers. We already took our break, so I won't take a break. But I'll pause here for any Q&R.